Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. A year ago, our province was in an election campaign, and on October 15th, 2020, the Premier stated that if elected, his government would implement the Old Growth Strategic Review Panel's report in its entirety. There is nothing to talk about, including the recommendation, Honourable Speaker, including the recommendation.
Let's listen to the question, please. Just wait. Please continue.
Including the recommendation to defer logging of old growth while developing a new strategy. Where are we at a year later? As of May, this government's approvals of logging of old growth increased 43% over the previous year. First Nations that have requested deferrals on their territories are still waiting, and BC has once again seen the largest act of civil disobedience in Canadian history, with over 1,100 people arrested at Fairy Creek. And in the meantime, no new deferrals. And as I expect we will hear a whole bunch of numbers thrown around in the response, I will remind this House that an analysis by scientists of the 200,000 hectares of deferrals announced in 2020 revealed that only 4,000 of those hectares actually contained productive old growth needing protection as defined by the Old Growth Review Panel's recommendations. My question, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources, Operations and Rural Development. On June 2nd of this year, the Minister stated in an interview on CBC, quote, "I expect we'll be able to announce additional deferrals this summer." Will the Minister be announcing these additional deferrals now that summer is over?
Minister of Forests.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member for the question, and I'm really happy to talk about this because I know how passionate everybody in the House is about old growth and about our forests in general. And just to remind the members that we have deferred harvesting of old growth in 11 areas across the province since the report was tabled last year, totaling nearly 200,000 hectares. We brought in a big tree regulation to protect over 1,500 groves of exceptionally large trees, those trees that people look to, those fantastic big trees that people want to put their arms around and can't. We've created an independent review, and we are committed to implementing all of those recommendations, as I have been saying, and all of those recommendations are being worked on. We've protected forest habitats for caribou, spotted owl, vulnerable species like the marble merilet and the northern goshawk. And we did work with the Pachidat, with the Didadat, and the Hawaiiat to defer over 2,000 hectares of old growth in the Fairy Creek watershed and the Central Walbran area. And yes, we did strike a new independent technical advisory panel. I think it's made up of the very people that the member referred to, working together to identify the most at-risk old growth ecosystems in the province and provide a basis for additional deferrals. The member may roll her eyes, but these are significant issues that we have dealt with and that we are moving forward on. We are implementing all 14 recommendations. We are moving forward, and we will be making more deferrals soon.
Leader of the third party. Leader of third party on supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I worry a great deal about when the reality that people are experiencing is not acknowledged or recognized by the people in here who they expect to represent them, who they expect to recognize what is actually happening. The talking points are well polished. They're great. And yet, the recommendation in that review panel's report indicated very clearly 6 months after the review panel report was received by government, implement deferrals on old growth logging in this province. We are now 18 months since this government got that report, and on August 4th, First Nation leaders in British Columbia called on BC to take immediate action to protect old growth. And it's not about picking and choosing. It's about actually doing what you say you're doing, Honourable Speaker. The Minister of Health yesterday and today has been saying we need to take action on climate change. We need to take action to ensure that British Columbia becomes more resilient to climate change. It's astonishing. 43% more approvals of old growth logging under this government than the year before. 43% more according to government data. Keep applauding
Members,
that.
let's
Keep
listen to the
applauding
question.
that. Scientists have estimated there are 1,300 tons of carbon per hectare stored in the old growth forest at Fairy Creek and in old growth forests in British Columbia. The reason those forests can contain that carbon is because of their biodiversity. We don't need another technical panel. We don't need another report. The only thing that's getting deferrals on here is actually the action this government kept promising it would take. We need government to do what it promised to do. My question, Honourable Speaker, through you is to this Premier. The vast majority of British Columbians want to see this government live up to its promise to protect the last remaining old-growth forests in this province. When will this file be treated as a priority by this government?
Minister of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources Operations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again, thank the member for her questions. And it's interesting that she referenced Fairy Creek because it was actually the message that was coming from her colleague, from colleagues outside, was that was the last remaining ecosystem, the last remaining old growth, and we did protect that. We protected that. Our government's also committed to reconciliation and to environmental protection, and which we believe must go together, must work hand in hand. And the days of making unilateral decisions on behalf of Indigenous peoples, they're over. And we... And I believe I've been very clear, our government has been very clear, that in order to protect old growth forests, we have to put Indigenous peoples at the front of the discussion, and that's what we're doing. We are having those discussions with Indigenous nations. We are looking at areas across the province, but we're also respecting the wants, wishes, and needs of Indigenous nations. And I just want to quote Hawaii Chief Councillor Robert Dennis, who said to people, "It is our responsibility to take care of our land for future generations. We are the decision makers. We follow the guidance of our elders and citizens to make the decisions we think are right. We are asking others to respect that process and follow our direction on our territory. Our citizens have a constitutionally protected right to manage and benefit from our lands, waters, and resources." And I think that we should all respect those words from Chief Councillor Robert Dennis. I think there's many other nations who have reached out and have said the same thing. And I think it's incredibly important that we respect the rights, needs, and wishes of Indigenous nations in this very important decision making.